Hello, lovers and friends. So today I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm talking about my hair. The long-awaited micro lock video. The reason why I'm doing this is because I genuinely get asked a lot of questions about my hair. And so I'm answering all of them today. Okay, so what's this video about? I have notes because your girl can go off a tangent. So I will be going through what microlocks are, how to install them, or how to get started, the different phases that they go through. I'll talk about maintenance, including my own maintenance journey or what I do. And then I will talk about things that I wish I had known sooner about microlocks, which is going to be quite interesting. And then I will actually show you how I retie my locks. So let's start with the beginning. What are microlocks? So microlocks are just a type of dreadlocks or locks that are installed by something called interlocking. So what happened in like the early 90s is this group of women, like, I don't even want to say they figured out or they discovered, but one of those discovered ways of how to braid or how to interlock your hair using a specific technique called interlocking. And they basically patented this technique, and they called it sister locks. So sister locks is a patented technique of interlocking that these two women, I think it's two women, invented like in the 90s or something. So as far as calling what this is, sister locks, is like I'm legally not allowed to, because they're not. I didn't use their method of doing it and their system and stuff, but effectively they are interchangeable. And for the purpose of research, if you're looking at like maintenance or anything like that, you can look at sister locks or microlocks. They're exactly the same thing. What is inherently the difference? So particularly with sister locks, you will hear people talking about the grid, and the grid is basically the formation in which they install the locks, like the lines that they put in your hair, when installing the locks. And basically this kind of guarantees the like the way that they fall, but also like the thickness and the uniformity of the lock, like going into forever. So you will see people that have had microlocks or sister locks for 20 years and they're like still the same thin, beautiful, long, just like luxurious, looking thing. So that method and that technique of doing sister locks, or doing microlocks and sister locks, guarantees you that kind of grid system. So you can look for it, but it's basically like just how they open the lines in the hair and how the hair falls and all of that stuff. As you can tell from my hair, is that I do not have those things. So I looked for a loctician when I got my hair done, which was maybe 4-5 years ago. No, maybe shorter, maybe 4 years ago, pre-COVID. And I couldn't find one, right? I think I'm a revolutionary when it comes to these things. And so there was just nobody doing it. Nobody had heard of them. It was like this weird concept that I had to like really, really scour the internet for. And so I was just like, you know what, I'll teach myself, because I literally was going to fly to Zimbabwe. There's a lady that I found in Zimbabwe who's like, no, she can do it. So she's like, you must come to Harare. I was just like, should I not? And I really contemplated. But anyway, so I learned how to do it. And so that is basically what sister locks are. Okay, so sister locks, the thickness and the number of locks also determines whether or not people will see your things as micro locks or traditional locks in terms of sizes. And generally they say like if it's thinner than a pencil, or pencil and thinner, then it is micro locks. Anything thicker would be like traditional locks. But the technique that you do the microlocks is called interlocking. So you can have thicker locks but interlocked, as opposed to using a gel and a twist. So basically that's the difference, is that this is like the technique that you use to interlock your hair. It looks like sewing, but it's not. You basically like interlock or sew the hair, as opposed to using a gel with like normal gelling dreads or locks to get the hair to bud. So the hair here doesn't like lock together like that. You kind of have to like, you knot it in a way, but you'll see that towards the end of the video. Okay, so So the number of the locks is also quite important. So that's basically how you can determine the thickness that you ultimately work with. So generally, you most people will gauge, like an experienced loctician will be able to gauge and tell you, like, at this thickness this is how many you're going to have, or if you have this many, this is how thick it's going to be. The thickness can vary, obviously it's personal preference. Obviously the thinner it is, like the more locks you have, which means it's going to take a long time to install but also a long time to maintain, and then obviously vice versa. Traditionally the sister locks also have a number, so they have like between 600 to like 2,000 or 1,000 something locks, just because of the thinness that they use. I have about 250, I want to say, more or less there. I say more or less because they actually change, they become more or less, have been coming more or less as I've been growing them, which is also a very, very weird thing. But basically you want to get set on the number of locks that you have, or at least like the thickness that you have, because it's quite important. Because so what happens is when you start off your locks, they will almost like double or like double and a half in thickness, depending on like your hair texture. So if you've got very fine hair, it could like double, but if you've got thicker hair, it could double and some change in terms of the thickness of your hair. So it's quite important to like think about that when you are installing your installing your locks, because when it's installed like the first time, which we'll talk about installation, when it's installed the first time, it may feel a little bit thinner. It's 100% a lot thinner than what it's going to look like once it's fully matured. Okay, so let's talk about how we install locks, or how we install Microlocs. So there are three ways of starting, not three ways, there are many ways obviously, but I'll just talk about three ways of starting your locks per se. So the first way, which is the most simple way, is either twisting or braiding, or the first two ways, either twisting or braiding. So people will go in for like thin twists or thin braids. And that will just be the starter locks, and then they will keep those in until the next time you go to your hair. Then you will keep the twists in, or the braids, and you'll just interlock starting from there. So that'll basically be like how you start off your locks. The way that I did it is that I started from interlocking from the get-go. So I interlocked from loose hair all the way to my scalp. This takes a lot longer, but the hair when it grows looks a little bit more consistent. Not to say that it doesn't look consistent if it's braided out, but you will obviously have like a clear separation, especially in the beginning, of where the twist is and where the new growth slash interlocked is. So I didn't want to do it twisted. I was doing it myself, so I did interlocking from the beginning. How long did it take me to install? It took me about a weekend to install my own hair on myself. I don't know how long it would take a person. I have installed my mom's as well, and it also takes about, it depends how thick they are, but like 6 to 12 hours. It's like installing braids, basically. Yeah, so let's talk about the different phases that your hair goes through when you are doing Microlocs. So in the beginning, I will tell you, which is something that I tell a lot of people, is like what you start off with is 100% not what you're going to end up with. That's the beauty of locks. And also what you start off with is not going to be identical, or it might be similar, but never identical to someone else's. You cannot look at someone's hair and think, well, they have hair like mine, and so we're going to do the same hairstyle and it will look the same. It won't. You just need to like embrace the love, embrace the journey, because everybody's locks just, I don't know what it is. It's just like the magic of locks just turn out very different. So generally there are like three phases that people talk about when they talk about locks, and the same thing for Microlocs. So the first stage is like the baby stage or the budding stage. This is where the actual hair, like because you've got loose hair, actually needs to like solidify and like interlock, right? Compress into each other and kind of like lock. This phase for me took about 18 months, and I generally tell people, give yourself 18 months for your hair to bud. Obviously throughout the process you will still have your locks and it will still look fine. It just doesn't feel like locks up until, for me, for that point, right? So like after a year and some change, you'll start feeling, you're like, oh, okay, cool, I've actually got some sort of like permanent thing in my hair. Yeah, so after the budding phase, so what generally happens in the budding phase is that this is where your hair will shrink, but also get fatter. So it kind of does this thing where it like swells into each other. This is the most important and most critical stage. If you are not happy with what your hair looks like here, like in terms of thickness, this is the point of like you can still go back from here. So once your hair, before it's completely budded, if you want to redo your locks at any point, or you want to start afresh or whatever, this is the actual point to do it. Anything beyond this is quite damaging to your hair, but like before it like fully buds, you can still comb out your hair quite easily. I say pay attention to this is because this is like, if you've made the thickness a problem, you'll start seeing it from here. So generally what happens is, especially once if you're doing the twist, is that the twists feel thinner, right? So when you've twisted your hair, especially if you've come from like very, very thick hair, you'll realize, and it will feel like you've got 5 hairs on your head, and it just doesn't feel natural because like, I've got lots of hair, and so like that felt very, very weird to have like very little hair. But give it time. 18 months is kind of the budding phase. Okay. Then the next phase that we go through is like the teen phase. This happens for like 6 to 10 to 12 months after the initial 18. This is at like year 2.5. This is where your hair is like fully formed, and you actually start like feeling the texture, feeling the volume. It will start looking like locks. It's a little bit temperamental in that some days it will look like really fluffy and some days it may not. But generally this is where like it starts getting a bit harder, and a bit more solid in its form. And then the adult stage, which is I think where I am now, is where you like, this is it. Your hair is locked, looking popping. It's amazing. By far the most testing phase is the budding phase because it buds differently. It could clump out really hard. I know in the beginning I used to have like budding and like ends would just like swell up to like double, even triple the thickness of the braid. If that happens, when that did happen, I would just snip the piece off. Obviously like later on once I had a little bit of length. But yeah, that's basically that. Okay, so then we're talking about maintenance. How do you maintain these things? Okay, so maintenance is varied, and everybody will give you very different opinions. Maintenance varies in the stage that you're at. So whether you're at a teenage stage, whether you're in a baby phase, or whether you're at the adult phase, and I wish I had been more simplified in my routine, like consistently. So the beauty of locks, and it's something that, especially if you come from like product overload, when you have loose hair, is that locks do not like product. It just works better when they are clean, like product free, and for a varied number of reasons. The first reason is that oil and oily substances generally attract dirt, and dust and lint and things. So the oilier your hair is, the more those things kind of stick to your hair, and especially while it's still in its teenage stage or in its baby stage, that lint and stuff kind of like buds in with your hair. I say this because it's something that I struggle with and I continue to struggle with. And I think it's also because I don't like tie my hair when I'm like put a bonnet on when I'm sleeping. But like lint is probably the biggest thing that I'm just like, oh my gosh, why do we have to keep doing this? Why do I still see you around? But I have found that like reducing the number of products that I use in my hair has made this a little bit better. So what are the products? Like, what do I actually do to my hair? So in the beginning, when I was still when it was still like teenage phase and baby phase, I would do the normal wash, condition, moisturize, oil over the locks, and that was fine. It just, because my hair wasn't as like solid and as dreadlocky as it was, it did feel like very dry, and it felt like it was gonna break. As my hair's become harder and I can actually feel like it's actually pretty strong now, like, if you pull this thing, I could probably like, I don't know, hang something on this, is that I've started to use a whole lot less product. What products do I use? Water. I know. So I wash my hair with regular shampoo. I'm currently using I toss right between maybe let me not mention the brands, but like I toss between like really good quality shampoos. Like that's something that I'm very obviously because I, me and natural hair are there in the skies. But like I generally won't skimp on a shampoo just because like I'm already carrying a lot of dust in my hair. It's already like very dirty, so I do use quite a strong natural hair shampoo. Okay, I'll give you names. The ones that I mix around with, I'll use the Design Essential. Anything from Design Essential I use on my hair without doubt. And then I've also been using the Mayel range as well. And then the My Natural Hair shampoo, as far as low cost shampoo is like still like this is a shampoo that I was introduced to like years and years and years and years ago, and it's still just like reach into it when you don't want to spend too much, or when you just need a shampoo that's going to do the thing. So I use those. I used to condition my hair, but I don't anymore. The reason why is, again, if you don't wash out the conditioner generally very well, then your hair attracts the lint and stuff. So during the first few years, I would condition my hair. I wouldn't do any deep conditioning anyway, but I would do like a rinse out conditioner. And then moisturize with a leave-in conditioner. I think I regret doing that, and I think if I had to go back and do it again, I would probably just use like oil and water, or like glycerin and water. Those like very very clear liquidy type of moisturizing product. So that's basically like if I knew the fourth point, right? What if I knew sooner, is I would use a whole lot less product. I know people use like rose water and bay rum and all of those things, but the default for me is like if it's clear, then I will try it on my hair. But if it's creamy, then I'm like very apprehensive, because once I do use creamy products, then at the bottom I'll see like all this lint, and it's not only lint, it's like product buildup as well, where you're just like, I didn't really wash out that conditioner very well, so like it's not worth it. How do I get rid of those things? You can't. You're either cutting or you're dyeing your hair. Like that's the only way to do it. Lint does not come out your hair once it's built in and locked in. It's the one thing that I possibly hate the most about locks. It's probably the only thing that I hate about locks, but like the lint for me is the worst thing. I have been doing henna on my hair as a part of a color treatment, and I love it. It does do like a bit of a protein strengthening treatment where my hair feels a little bit stronger but not crunchy when I do it. And I have been doing this, well, I did it last year and I did it this year, so I do it once a year, maybe once every 8 months. I'll probably do it again more regularly just because I found a box that I like. I'm using the Inecto henna treatment thing, but I mean henna is henna. You can even just use the one with like the lady picture on it or whatever. Like it's just a thing. Okay, and then the last thing is how to maintain, like in terms of maintenance, how do you retie? So retying, there are a few ways of retying your hair. It works when you understand what interlocking is, and I'll show you in a video somewhere what the actual process is, or at the end of this. But the three tools that you can use for interlocking, well, the three tools that I use for interlocking are these three. So first you have this, oh, I see why they do this. You have this type crochet needle, which is the one that you will get. I mean, you get this everywhere. So it's got like this little flappy thing. How do you do this? It's got like this flappy thing that opens. Okay. The second one that I use is something that looks like this. You may have seen this on the internet somewhere. This is called an interlocking tool. This is the actual tool that they use. These vary in thickness, so both in this opening but also in this opening, so depending on which one you have, you can use. And then my go-to, ironically, is actually just a standard crochet, like the one that you would just use for a needle. This is a 3mm crochet. If you don't know how to crochet, then this becomes really difficult, but I know how to crochet, so this was the easy this was an easy win for me, and I consistently use this one. I don't like using this one because I feel like it sometimes breaks your hair, especially if you are doing it yourself. This is quite sharp, and so like if you're pulling through and it snags, it can like rip your hair. This is much more gentle, but yeah, actually this is probably like the best tool that you can use, but I just prefer to use something like this because it's super quick. And that's it. I'll show you in the next video then how I actually interlock, and I will do it with all three so that you can see how that goes. In terms of how I interlock or how often I interlock, because I do it myself, I don't have like a set schedule to say like every 2 weeks or every 2 months, but generally it works out to about every 6 to 8 weeks. Ironically, when I was on holiday the last time, I didn't interlock for 3 months. And I thought I was gonna hate it, but I didn't hate it, but I didn't also love it. So I would do it again. Like I would go in the stretch for a longer time. It's just so at the back, because my hair is a lot finer and thinner, it felt like when the hair like was growing, like separating it, almost felt like it was breaking. So I don't know if I'm happy about like that. But nothing broke, even as thin as like it can get. Like I've got some really thin locks at the back, and they don't break. So you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, so every 6 to 8 weeks, obviously, if you've got a routine and you've got someone doing it, I would rather go sooner rather than later, because I know sometimes they'll charge you extra if it's longer, like if you take too long to go in between reties. And also like what happens is, especially in the beginning, if your hair's not completely formed, like if you're not in the adult or teenage phases, that sometimes they will merge together and just kind of like grow into one another. I mean, you've seen what locks do. And so separating them can be quite a challenge, and quite like, I won't say dangerous, but dangerous in that sense. So yeah, that's all I have. I hope this was helpful. If there's anything else that you have in the question, let me know in the comments below. Obviously, this is not the type of content that I'm used to filming, but I hope it's helpful for someone out there. Okay, guys, see you soon. Bye.